Today's literacy lesson is probably going to be a bit more of a difficult one. We're going to be retelling a story. So, using the plans which you came up with on Tuesday, we're going to be telling the story of Adelita in our own words. So, to be successful, we're going to see if we can write simple sentences to retell a story. We're going to see if we can use compound and complex sentences to retell a story. We're going to see if we can use interesting and exciting vocabulary choices just so we can make our work a bit more interesting. And we're going to see if we can use a range of punctuation to mark our sentences. Now, on Tuesday's lesson, we had a look at what happens in the story of Adelita, and we made our story plans about what happened in each of the 5 sections: the introduction, the build-up, the climax, the resolution, and the ending. Now, today we're going to be putting all of those into our own piece of extended writing, which will probably take you about half an hour. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the different sections of my writing, and then you're going to see if you can basically replicate your own version. So this is your writing checklist. This is the things that you should be including in your work. So things that need to go throughout the whole thing would be the past tense. It needs to be written about what's happened already. The neat handwriting needs to stay throughout as well, but it'd be lovely to see some joins from some of you as well. And of course, capital letters and full stops, that is the fundamental basic that has to go in your writing. So those 3 things are things which I want to see in the whole piece of writing. Throughout your writing, I would also like to see a range of punctuation. So question marks, maybe speech marks, which we practiced in Monday's lesson, exclamation marks and commas as well. I'd like to see some adjectives, expanded noun phrases, verbs and adverbs, which are just going to make your work more interesting. I'd love to see some conjunctions, so words like but, or, and for the coordinating conjunctions, and words like when, which, if, even, though, so, and because as the subordinated conjunctions to make your sentences a bit more detailed, just to tell the story in a more succinct way. So I'm going to show you the first section of my story. I'm going to show you the introduction. So here's my introduction. It says, once upon a time lived a handsome boy named Francisco. He lived in a beautiful large castle in the north of Mexico with his mother, father, and loyal servant Esperanza. When he grew older, he fell in love and decided that he wanted to get married to the lovely Adela. The two were married and instantly fell pregnant with a baby girl. They named her Adelita, which means little Adela in Spanish. So as you can see in my introduction there, I've introduced the characters. So you've met the characters of Esperanza, Francisco, Adela, Adelita. And you've met the setting, which is the castle in north of Mexico. And then I've just told you about what happens at the very, very start of the story. So what I'd like you to do now is pause the video and have a go at seeing if you can write your own introduction. Remember, you need to focus on those characters, you need to focus on the setting, and then just what happens at the very, very start of the story. So pause the video now and have a go at that. Okay, hopefully you're ready to move on to the build-up, and I'm going to show you what my build-up looks like. So, after the birth of Adelita, unfortunately, Adela fell sick and suddenly passed away. Francisco was heartbroken because he had lost his love. When a few years had passed, Francisco met a new lady called Donna Michaela, who he decided to marry. At first, her and her daughter seemed extremely friendly, but after a while, Adelita saw their true colours. They were nasty, vile people. So when Francisco died, Adelita knew her life would change. So I've now done the build-up of the story. So we've unfortunately got Francisco losing his wife, and then meeting the new lady Donna Michaela and marrying her. And Esperanza knew that she was a cold person, that she wasn't very nice. But obviously, after a while, Adelita saw their true colours. So when Francisco died, Adelita knew life would change. So I've just told the build-up of the story now. So again, what I'd like you to do is see if you can have a go at the build-up. The bit where Adela dies, Francisco remarries, they're not nice people, and Francisco dies. That's the build-up of the story. Remember to include things from the checklist. Pause it here and have a go at your build-up of the story. Okay, you've had a go at the build-up. We're going to move on to the next section now. So we've done the introduction, build-up, now for the climax. Adelita spent much of her time in the kitchen with Esperanza, who was quickly becoming a good friend. However, one day, Donna Michaela dropped a bombshell and fired Esperanza. Adelita was left alone to do all the chores in the house. She got more and more miserable over time. Then Prince Javier announced that he was having a massive fiesta to celebrate his birthday, and everyone in the land would be invited. Can I come? Asked Adelita. Absolutely not. You have to tidy all of the house from top to bottom, replied Donna Michaela harshly. Adelita was sat at home crying when suddenly there was a knock at the door. So you can see in this part of the story, I've built up to the climax of, oh, what's going to happen in the story. I've used a bit of speech here as well. So I've said, can I come? And remember, I've used the question mark inside the speech because it's what she's saying, which is what we talked about on Monday. And we got to the point where there's a knock at the door. We know who it is, but the reader won't know. So it builds a nice bit of suspense. What I'd like you to do is have a go at writing your climax of the story. Again, your checklist is on the screen. Pause it here and see if you can have a go at writing your climax. Okay, ready to move on to the next part of the story, which of course is the resolution. So they've all invited to the fiesta. Adelita has to stay behind. So what's going to happen in the resolution? Let's read it. This is the resolution here. Who could that be? Adelita opened the door cautiously, not sure who was going to be there. It was Esperanza. I am here to help you to go to the fiesta, said Esperanza. Adelita was delighted and got dressed super speedily. She wore her mother's beautiful white dress and silky red scarf. When Javier looked at Adelita, he immediately fell in love. They danced together all night, but when the clock struck 12, Adelita needed to leave. Javier didn't know who this mystery woman was, yet he knew that he was in love. So now that's the resolution of the story, which is where Esperanza helps Adelita. She goes to the fiesta. Javier falls in love with her and she leaves at 12 o'clock. And what's going to happen next? I'd like you to have a go at writing your resolution. Again, checklist on the screen to make sure you are using the correct things in your story. Pause the video here and then we'll move on to the ending of the story once you've done that. Okay, then the final part of our story. Remember, the final part is the ending, where Javier searches for Adelita, he finds her, they marry, and they live happily ever after. So let's listen to my ending. The very next day, Javier began searching for his mystery love. He went to all the houses in the land, but he just couldn't find her. Adelita stared sadly out of the window and saw him coming in the distance. To get his attention, she waved her long red scarf out of the tallest window so that Javier could find her. He knocked on the door of the castle, and Donna Michaela answered. While he was looking at the two ugly stepsisters, Adelita wandered in. Javier knew straight away that this was the girl of his dreams. They married the next day and lived happily ever after. So now I've finished the story. That's the end of the story. And remember, it has that nice happy ending as well. So I'd like you to have a go at seeing if you can write your ending now. Remember, your writing checklist is on the screen for you to write your final part of your story. Right, so hopefully you've now finished your story. Now, the most important thing to do once you have finished your story is to keep this checklist on the screen for you to have a look at. And I'd like you to read through the whole story. Maybe you can read it out loud to one of your family members. And then you can check and see if you've, first of all, included all of those things in the checklist. And second of all, if you've made any mistakes, you can change those now. So you can do some editing, we call that. Once you've had a go at finishing your story, remember, I'd like to see examples of them on DB Primary. So you can upload your whole story to DB Primary for us to read and have a look at. Hopefully, even though that lesson was probably a bit difficult and your hand is probably aching from all your writing now, you found that quite useful and maybe wrote a really good retelling of the story of Adelita. And hopefully that might inspire you to write your own stories, maybe based on other fairy tales as well, like this is based on Cinderella. I'm looking forward to seeing some of the work. And remember, if you need any support with anything at all, then send a message to one of the teachers on DB Primary.